All right, well, welcome to both of you, Geoff and Bodhi. It's a delight to engage with your work and to think about immunity, community, ants, and you've invited us to think about the current moment in a speculative register, and just would like to invite you to say a little bit about these pieces and how they relate to other things you're working on.
Okay, well, I might take a quick lead on the single authored piece, which is the community and immunity, and then I'll ask Bodhi to take the lead on the more finished piece, which is ant network theory. I mean, essentially, this relates to work I've been interested in for many years about. I framed it in terms of thinking about new metaphors for understanding our relationship with other beings, and especially, I mean, I'm not new on this. It goes back to Susan Sontag, who is, really down on the whole concept of, battles and wars against diseases. And I wanted to, in Borges's terms, start thinking about new metaphors. The context for this was we've done a series of workshops / conferences called the Re-Enlightenment, and the theme of this year's Re-Enlightenment was ways in which knowledge was stuck and how could we unstick it. So it's reimagining the Enlightenment for the 21st century. And I think one way in which knowledge is extremely stuck, as the work of many of you, really brings out, is multi-species relationships. So what if we prioritize, in Michel Serres' terms, I've always loved this about his book, The Parasite, where he prioritizes the relationship over the so-called separate individuals. And so what does it look like if analytically you start from the relationship rather than from the entity? So something I've written about a little bit before, and it sort of goes back to one of the basic tenets, I think, of actor network theory, which is the ontological priority of mediation. But I'm totally happy to talk more about that a little bit later. Bodhi, do you want to do the ant piece?
Sure. Thanks, Geoff. Hi all, I'm Bodhi. I work on science fiction primarily here at the University of Oslo. So the ant piece is something that Geoff and I worked on when Geoff was here last year for a full year at the Center for Advanced Studies here. And so we were thinking around time and questions of time, and also around speculation and science fiction. So Geoff and I keep talking about science fiction all the time. So so we decided to work on something that that brought our interests together: speculation, thinking with more than human worlds, and also thinking with different kinds of times and temporalities, play a lot with time, and of course also play a lot with non-human knowledge or thinking with other species. So we were, Geoff was actually invited to write this piece for NatureCulture, and then we collaborated on this, and it became a collaborative piece where we kind of, we went for a kind of a theory fiction mode where we discussed a lot of, we had more footnotes than text than story, but yeah, it's an experiment, and hopefully first of several, because we are working on other pieces too. So yeah, we have presented on that particular paper before. So there's this notion that we played around quite a lot with, which is ant network theory, also responding to Tim Ingalls' comment on ant versus spider and so on, and then taking it further and playing more with it, because that is also kind of fictional piece. So taking it further and as far as we could push it. So so maybe Geoff, you would like to add a bit more about the manifest?
No, I think that's right. I mean, I think that's great, Bodhi. I mean, we can throw it up to discussion. You know, I'll just say that, you know, if we get a little bit of time at the end, Bodhi and I are now working on fungi. And we'd really love interesting references, both fictional and scientific, and, well, whatever references you have on fungi, because they're really fun guys. Okay, let's throw it open.
So I've got a question for starters, and it's about a word that I know has a lot behind it, because Geoff, I spent the better part of 2 years talking with you about this word. So you say, just in terms of self-interest, a virus has no interest in wiping out its host. So, you know, it's probably been 10 years ago now, we were talking about the French version of that word, intéressement, or, you know, at least a related word, you know, that has to do with the paper as well. You know, it's a key word of actor network theory. And, you know, to me, it strikes me that this pandemic might be a failure of viral intéressement, in the sense of, you know, the virus failing to kind of attend, and maybe attend is even the wrong word, that imputes kind of too much conscious purpose or agency to viral processes. But yeah, I just wanted to invite you to riff on that word and that sentence. Just in terms of self-interest, a virus has no interest in wiping out its host.
Yeah, I mean, let's back up a little bit. I mean, the word intéressement was core to Michel Callan, who was one of the developers of actor network theory with Bruno Latour. And I think one of the best examples I know from that, which will be familiar to many of you, is in the Pasteurization of France by Latour, where, you know, you get the fact that the French have been defeated by the Prussians. It's been a huge blow to national pride, and you've got Pasteur who's developing his work, and there seems to be no connection between the two. And what the work of Pasteur, the work that Pasteur did, was to make the French government interested in funding his research as a way of establishing national pride, re-establishing national pride after 1871. 1871 is the Prussian invasion. And so what you're trying to do when you're in the theory of intéressement, you're always trying to inflect other people so that their interests align with yours one way or another, and so that they can't see beyond that. They can only see the relationship, which is the good relationship, and they don't really see and can't think beyond that in terms of possible bad relationships. With COVID-19, I'd sort of give it time. I mean, who knows? I was thinking about HIV/AIDS, a fair amount in the last week or so in the interstices of boxes. And in a sense, there is now a relatively good way of interacting with HIV over the long term, and it's taken a long time to develop it. But one of the things is that now we can't imagine dealing with HIV/AIDS without dealing with big pharma, without dealing with the big companies that deal with it. So that's actually, become a pretty successful network, through intéressement. Now, when I made that comment about viruses and kind of, whether the viruses act to interest us or not, that goes back to a very old debate within actor network theory about whether non-humans have intention or not. And I've always, I don't want to go into that unless people want to, but I've always felt very unhappy with the concept of non-humans having intention. But I do believe in creating a language in which we can understand the non-humans in their own terms. And to get technical on active network theory, I think active network theory has been terrible about dealing with non-humans, precisely because it's been unable to develop an interesting language about it.
Thanks, Geoff. Maybe a related point that might draw Bodhi into the conversation too. So on page 35 of this actor network theory ANT paper, point number 2 is all evolution is assisted evolution, which is, I think, a pretty generative assertion. And if either of you want to riff on that, I think that could be an interesting way to open it up.
Geoff? Geoff muted himself. So so when we were thinking about it, it's also really a question of how we understand the problem of evolution, or if it is a problem at all. And you know, I think before that, we should probably step back to the question of nature-culture divide, and then take this one, because it's kind of like steps into this argument. Because one of the things that Geoff is also unhappy with, and so am I, is this kind of a nature-culture binary that is often set up, which is also this journal there where we published it. It's called NatureCulture, right? So NatureCulture's moving, working with those two together. So we were thinking of, you know, that okay, you can club them together, but it still relies on a certain kind of separation between the two. So that's why we began with that kind of an assertion that, well, there is no real divide in there. So it's different ways of, you know, it's, so there is this lovely phrase that I use as my signature line, which is about boxes, right? That everyone should have a box that they don't know what to do with, right? And don't know what to put in. So that's kind of, so a lot of these terms work like boxes. Genre works like a box, where you put things that you don't quite know what to do with, but it serves as a way to classify and to divide and so on. So moving from there to the question of assisted evolution is, how do we understand evolution? How do we talk about assisted evolution, right? So when we are talking about multi-species relations, or at least when we were talking about ants and humans, we were thinking it in terms of, you know, things existing in relationship to other things and growing together and moving together, right? So that is kind of where the whole argument of assisted evolution comes in. It may not be the typical understanding of assisted evolution. It comes from a very specific problem also of genre. And I think Geoff can add more about that.
Sorry, buddy, I'm sort of in trouble here because my connection dropped while you were talking, so I've got no idea what you said. So let's assume I can't add anything. But I'm back now.
Well, I think point 2b on that same page 35, evolution is a hybridization consisting of the differentiation and production of networks. You know, so a few weeks ago, so Stefan's on the line, who shared a lively paper with us about viruses as living processes, and insisting that we don't think of viral particles, things, as being alive, but thinking about viruses as they interface with the machinery. And machinery is probably a bad metaphor, or at least a limiting one, but you know, the organelles and the Golgi apparatus and all the things that transcribe and translate and turn, you know, these particles into lively things. So maybe just, yeah, if you could riff, Geoff, more on this all evolution is assisted evolution, and thinking about that hybridization that differentiates and produces networks. I think that has some potential to really displace dominant ways of thinking about the current moment.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to, hear others on, on this topic. But yeah, let me just get back to, sorry. need to get back to the point so I know what I'm referring to.
I love the camera work too, Geoff, that we get to see.
Yes. Yeah, sorry about that. It's a new setup and I'm trying to make sense of it right now. Yeah, evolution is hybridization consisting of the differentiation and production of networks. Again, this is getting away from the idea of, the single entity which contains the organism. And there's a couple of ways of thinking about that. One is in terms, let me bring up Zoom again. Yeah, one is in terms of the skin. What is the role of the skin for humans? And Arthur Bentley wrote this book with my favorite title of all time. He's a pragmatist philosopher, The Skin, the Philosopher's Last Line of Defense, which assumes that, people are what happens behind the skin. Now, in terms of, as I understand it, in terms of medical history, the closure of the skin actually happens towards the end of the 18th century, and that before then the skin was seen as kind of open, as a kind of open membrane to the world around it. But with the Enlightenment and the creation of the liberal subject, we also get medically the closure of the body into the skin. And again, what that means is that you are, it's sort of like the problem with the Svalbard seed vault in Norway, which many of you will know. I mean, one of the problems with that is it assumes that entities are defined by their genetic code. So you're getting more and more essentialist and more drawing entities down to some kind of essence. And the whole concept, as I understood it when we were playing with hybridization, was that it's all about the networks and it's all about building the networks. So what happens analytically when we put the networks in central place? Does that make sense, Bodhi?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I kind of also wanted to add or re-emphasize the genre point, actually, because I think one of the things that we are trying to do in this piece, which is why it's a fiction and which is why it's a theory fiction piece, is we are also placing this as an inquiry into genre, like genre, genera. We are playing with a lot of words in this particular paper, but also the history of science fiction itself. Now, like a lot of questions when it comes to nature, culture, or any of these distributions, it's really about, thinking in terms of an original, which then gets hybridized into something else, or a culture that comes in and mixes, messes things up and so on. And that's kind of the same argument that is also often used for literary genres, for things like science fiction, for instance. I mean, because my work is on global SF, and one of the things that happens when we read a lot of science fiction is that, a lot of these narratives seem to come together as part of one connected history, that these are not separate stories, right? So whether we are looking at story from 1930s Bengal or 2010s Finland, or 1940s Japan, or 1890s England, or further back, these are all kind of narratives that speak to each other. Right? So hybridization, but when we write generally history of genres, like history of science fiction, for instance, we tend to eliminate this notion of hybridization by placing originals and things that follow the original, right? So there is an origin in H.G. Wells, there is an origin in Jules Verne, and then everything follows from it. So a lot of these questions about hybridization also have to do with history of literary genres, with post-colonial understandings of hybridization, as that genres, and even in genres, there are no original texts, that you can write a history of ants in science fiction, and this would be a kind of a transcontinental, transhistorical, multiple timeline kind of narrative, where a 2010 text might precede something that is written in 1930s. When we write this history of or ants in science fiction. So that was the other way in which we were playing with this idea. So I just wanted to add that.
Nice.
Yeah.
It looks like we lost one of our interlocutors here for a phone call. Let's listen and hear what kind of phone call it is. The very last line on that same page also really jumped out at me. So you're talking about traces of non-living and not yet living as the pheromone trail of actor network theory, and you know, I feel like that kind of boundary zone between life and non-life, as we're, you know, thinking back to the viral, and you know, that's a generative zone for me. So how do you see that playing out in the SF worlds that extend out from this piece?
So in genre theory, and especially in science fiction theory, so there are two formulations that I've kind of been working with, which have to do with this kind of notion of a pheromone trail, really. So one is the notion of the megatext, which is the set of conventions that describe or define a genre. And it's a yeah. I mean, the idea is that if you see a text, then you would be able to tell with the tropes it uses that this is a science fiction text. So, you know, if you have an alien and you have an unidentified flying object or something like that, then you know, oh, this is going to be science fiction, right? If you see a unicorn on the book cover, you would immediately say, oh, this is fantasy, right? If you have a medieval looking castle with a unicorn, it's definitely fantasy, right? So the genre megatext kind of like is those ideas that in a way define the identity of a genre, right? Now, so that's the first idea that we were thinking of, and also what we use in global SF, that you can look at a text, let's say produced in, I mean, H.G. Wells is not the first one to use a time machine, but anyway, let's say you have H.G. Wells producing or creating a time machine in 1895, and then you can look at another text from 2010 and say, well, this is also using a time machine. So this is part of the genre text of science fiction, right? So this is the way we identify connections, genealogies, histories. This is how we write the story. And we can write this story across, you know, continents, timelines, and so on, right? Then there is the notion of mass cultural genre system, which John Reader develops, which is kind of like this, you know, jumbled space of genres, right, where everything actually comes out in the same pages, but the readers decide ultimately what gets slotted where, right? So so over time, you get to decide what is science fiction, what is not, what is, you know, what works and what doesn't. Now, when I talk about global SF, and this is what I've been trying to kind of map in my Co-Futures project, that neither of these formulations work beyond a point. So yes, we can classify, you know, so genre allows us to classify what we see and so on. But maybe the problem is not so much genre, but more a problem of history and what kind of narratives we are trying to pull in to our notion of that genre, right? And when one looks at literature from what we call the planetary perspective, that is, you know, that different things have moved into different kinds of literary constellations, there is no origin, right? It's always a jumble. So it's not like the jumble existed at one point and then it got sorted out. It is a jumble, it will remain a jumble. And one of the reasons for that is because all texts depend on breaking the formula. So if you have a science fiction work which uses a time machine, and another work that uses a time machine, what is the difference between work A and work B? They would be identical, right? But they are not. Each work that comes in transforms the genre itself, the genre space itself, by adding new elements to it. And each genre object or whatever comes into this space also reformulates all the history that goes before it and afterwards. So the ant stories in a way do that, which is why a 2010 story can precede, in chronology, it can precede a story written in the 1930s. So that's kind of the pheromone trail. So what are we actually trying to track here? What is the story we want to tell? And this has been a very, for literary history, this has been a very political question, primarily because of this notion of influence, that, oh, everything was produced in the Anglophone world first. H.G. Wells wrote something first and then everybody else copied it. It doesn't work like that, right? Or, Mary Shelley created, Frankenstein, and suddenly, boom, the genre of science fiction was born. No, what was Mary Shelley reading? Well, on the one hand, she was reading Hebrew mythology. On the other, she was reading Arabian Nights. I mean, the Golem narrative and the rebirth narrative, bring things back to life. Things get mixed up, and then you come with something else. So you can't identify an origin point. But within genre histories, they always want an origin point. Genre historians always want an origin point. And this has been a political question because genre has been defined for that very reason. Science fiction versions and visions of the future have generally been defined in extremely white, extremely Anglocentric terms, like H.G. Wells. How many of us have even heard of Enrique Gaspar, who invented, if you want to call it that, the time machine 6 years before H.G. Wells? We don't. He's Spanish, not that well known, but anyway, chrononauts. So yes, it's a long rant, but it's a genre rant.
Thanks, Bodhi. Do other folks want to jump in? I've got a lot more questions, but I'd love other folks to jump in with their own.
I'm curious about the conversation that you guys were having about non-human beings. I'll be honest, I didn't read your article for today, but I'm very excited to do so after this lively conversation. But a couple of things that jumped out from recent commentary is this question of assisted evolution. And obviously we immediately go into the Frankenstein kind of genre, if you will. And I think it's so interesting that you bring in, varying SF takes, from. So anyway, yeah, going back to the question about the multi-species and the non-human, I was curious to know, what particular types of non-humans you're thinking with. Are you guys critter people? Are you AI people? Both? And body hacking, biohacking, those are the things that jump out at me when I start thinking about or with, hybridization monsters, the monsters as that hybridization. But anyway, very nice. Thank you very much, and nice to meet you both.
And to bring that question that Lisette just asked back to the texts, so on page 31, you're saying, and it is kind of both, it's critters and AIs and other sorts of agencies. So on page 31, you're saying, like ants, we do not seek to become or to create a hive mind, but to embrace a form of collective multi-species intelligence. I thought that was another sentence and phrasing that really stood out.
That actually, before I get to hear the original respondent's response, I just wanted to say that reminds me of people that you've written about, Eben, Prabhapular, and Anuj, and their notion of distributed intelligence, and they're also working with this, the larval rock stars, the, creature with a shared anus that processes information and is gross and yet fascinating. So just to bring them into conversation with us too, and also working from a non-traditionally Western perspective. Right?
Oh, Evan, you wanted to add something?
No, go for it, Bodhi. Please jump in.
Yeah, and thank you very much for that comment. When we started playing with the idea, so I'm fascinated by ants. So that's one of the reasons we went for the ants first. But I think we didn't want to restrict ourselves to one non-human. In fact, we didn't even want to deal with the human. We wanted to question the human, and that's why in the three narratives we played more with time and showed how different, or tried to show at least, I don't know if we did, but tried to show at least different kinds of intelligences, different ways of also understanding intelligence. So we talk about, in the second narrative, we talk about 18 different kinds of species that possibly exist, taking off from Olaf Stapledon's Last and First Men, actually, where there are 18 human species. But again, the kinds of species that we deal with are not really things as we know them. These are gigantic, in my head at least, these are gigantic creatures which are kind of a composite or a patchwork of many different kinds of creatures. And I mean, we have been thinking. So Geoff, yeah, once he joins in the conversation, he can add more to this, because what we are trying to think with is not so much, not even ants, but we are thinking around questions of possible future species. And there are works in science fiction that have dealt with this quite a lot. I mean, you know, Wayne Barlow's Guide to Extraterrestrials, for instance, is one. And then there are all these Dougal Dixon's Man After Man and texts like that, which do a lot with imagining these future kinds of species. But we wanted to imagine these future species as hybrids, not as the development of a particular type, but as things that are composite. Because yeah, I think that's more likely to be the future. Anyway, that's our understanding. That's what we were playing with. But thank you, great question.
I'll leave a pause if, Anne, do you want to jump in?
Yeah. Thank you very much for these fascinating papers. And just, I wanted to go back to what Eben said in the beginning, where you quoted, a virus has no interest in wiping out its host, because this also stuck to me. Because if the control parameter of a virus is still death, right? Even though it's not in its best interest to kill the host, but it's still the natural control parameter of a virus is death. But if you now in the Ant network theory article, if you bring in AI, there is, and you were to reach singularity, there is no control parameter for that. So how would you, because the control parameter is not death, but whatever parameter you would want to optimize. So what would be the control parameter in artificial intelligence? Have you dealt with this, Bodhisattva? Because there is still a natural control mechanism for a virus, but in AI, what would that be?
We haven't dealt with that, no. And this is really a question of, again, you know, thinking in terms of artificial, and we try not to make that distinction at all. And that is also the point of the manifesto at the very end, that we don't want to make this distinction of technological and natural. We don't We don't play with that at all. The idea is really to leave it as an open space and see where it takes us, rather than to to find some kind of an answer.
Right, because I mean, if you can look at, because you use evolution and co-evolution in your article as well, and you could see that in AI through machine learning is also some way of, you could draw a parallel in terms of how it evolves and how it learns, right? And if you were to reach singularity, there is just no control mechanism. So there, I was just thinking, because you could draw a comparison between a virus, how a virus learns, and how AI learns through machine learning, but there is no control mechanism for one. But there is one natural one for the virus still.
Well, it really, again, to thank you, but I mean, the way I think about this is that if we are thinking of control mechanisms, then there is one, and that control mechanism is the universe itself. So there is, it is really a question of scale as well. So we think of viruses, we think of lifespans and things like that, because also the evolution of artificial intelligence, because there has been, there is a lot of like singularity is one kind of argument, but also evolving AI. How do you evolve AI? What kind of, what do you teach in a way a machine so that it can actually become intelligent, right? For that matter. But really the larger question is, what is the limit of this? What is your scale? So if we are thinking of viruses, if we are thinking of lifespans of natural objects, we have a certain notion of scale. If we have the universe, we have another notion of scale. So the thing that I employ quite a lot in my own work is this notion of Kalpavigan, which is the word that Indians, or more specifically, it's a Sanskrit inflected word, Kalpavigan, in which the word kalpa is really the unit of time. So it's a unit of time that is from the beginning to the end of the universe. So kalpa is an eon, right? So there are people who have dealt with this kind of understanding of artificial intelligence and singularity and so on as well. So it's a question of scale. To me, it's a question of scale, a scale that we don't quite deal with in the paper. Okay. But thank you. It is a very relevant question. Thank you.
So there's a chat going on in the group forum about sort of who's building these AIs. I'm also thinking about something you were saying a little bit ago, Bodhi, about kind of these SF imaginaries for hybrid, kind of trans-species futures. And yeah, also, what Lisette brought up, Prabha Pilar's very critical engagements with these techno-futurist imaginaries. Prabha, who started out as a healthcare advocate from Colombia, whose life was saved by a clinical trial, but then her sister lost her life in a clinical trial. And she started out doing like NGO policy work, but found that she could more effectively animate and destabilize conversations by amplifying and distorting the singularity prophecy of Ray Kurzweil. So she dresses up in the silver jumpsuit and talks about uploading one's consciousness into the cloud, and what an amazing transcendent possibility that presents. And I guess this is sort of a roundabout way of asking, just about kind of critical, like how do you bring like a critical post-colonial perspective to bear on these SF imaginaries, which are often very white, very techno-future optimalist, like, and at the same time that you see these fantastic visions and SF worlds of hybrid possibilities for humanity, there's a real normalizing tendency of technologies as they enter the clinic, whether that's you know, producing future imaginaries that are similar to the ones that you see in contemporary cosmetic surgery clinics, where we're all becoming a particular image of beautiful that's marked by race and class, or you know, normative eugenics movements that are about, you know, eliminating disabled folks from the population or queer folks from the population. So I'm just, yeah, interested in hearing you say more. And also wanting to point everyone, you've got a fabulous list of footnotes in this piece. And footnote 6 on page 37 is, you know, just one of the places where you're gesturing towards these human evolutionary futures, these techno-futurist goals about human optimization that are kind of eclipsing other imaginaries. So just love to hear you riff on some of those themes.
Yeah, thank you. I'm also like reading the chat. I quite like the comment about AI's control parameters is still built by human interest. This is also the laws of robotics, Asimov's laws. Again, to go back to the Kalpa notion, because Asimov's laws of robotics are actually based on the way of the Bodhisattva, which is a 7th century text about the rules that Buddhist monks are supposed to follow. And the rules are so tough that that Asimov decided that it was, you know, it was not possible for a human to do it. So instead, he distilled those laws into the laws of robotics, right? So it's interesting to see that these are actually parameters that were designed for the control of humans in a way, and human self-regulation, which transformed into the laws of robotics. So I think that's a really great comment. I have done quite a bit of work earlier on post-humanism and things like that, and specifically, you know, this is actually my work with architects, trying to imagine future urban cities and smart cities in which, you know, and different versions and varieties of the smart cities with different versions and varieties of post-humans, right? So this can be a really long discussion of its own, really. It's, yeah. I would like some more comments on the whole.
So everyone feel free to just unmute yourself and jump in if you like.
Well, you mentioned that it might be a very long conversation on its own, but I'm really curious about your work with architects about smart cities. I mean, one can argue that a lot of the discussions about smart cities these days is projecting a sort of human, non-human hybrid already in terms of data collection and so forth. So kind of want to hear more if possible.
Thank you. Yes, I completely agree with you. I mean, I could send you my paper, so because there I deal with some of these questions. I'm actually writing a second part of that right now, also for architects and urban planners. So yes, they do imagine a lot of hybrids already. And this is kind of also the old point about, you know, cyborgs and so on, and things like that, that we are not really, you know, humans are not humans. We are also technological objects, or we are always augmented in some ways or the other. So it really, and I think that, but it goes in the direction of what was being discussed earlier, in the sense of techno-fixes, right? That you can actually solve all problems by making these hybrids, right? Or, you know, you can solve all human problems by making smart cities, right? You know, you don't need smart cities, you need smarter humans, right? That's kind of the problem, that cities are smarter than humans, right? which also brings us to questions of post-humanity and so on, where you know, a machine intelligence might be deciding your future in a way. And I think a lot of SF plays with this. So I was writing today about this short story by Anil Menon about which is set in end of the century Mumbai, and it's called Shit Flower. And the shit flower is lotus, actually, because lotus grows in swamps and so on. And so in that story, the sewage system is controlled by machines, and the machines are kind of intelligent, as in they need to have a personality, just enough personality to keep doing their work, but not so much that they evolve and say, we don't want to do this job anymore, right? So you have to keep them at that optimal level. And the problem that is identified for these machines is the ability to joke. Because you know, jokes are kind of the thing that sets humans in a way apart from machines, right? You can tell a human being a joke once, they will laugh. You tell them the same joke twice, they won't. You tell them a third time, they will get annoyed, right? So it's a kind of a mechanism for humans and how humans process knowledge, right? But a machine which is built to do repetitive tasks will not have that consciousness. So so Menon plays a lot with this idea of jokes. So the entire story is kind of a big joke, you know. So there's not blackouts but brownouts because the city is overrun by sewage and so on. It's fantastic. So yes, it's a long discussion. Could go on forever. Viral urban planning. Yeah.
Stefan, do you want to jump in?
Yeah. Hi everyone. No, I just wrote that because I was thinking about how the current pandemic kind of, you know, forces us to rethink our city structures. So I thought it's interesting that you work with architects and urban planning and all that, because obviously that's a big issue now as well. And it was in the piece about ants and how they cultivate fungi, and the same happens in termites, because they have, like, in their mounds, they have fungi gardens as well. And some people who study these mounds, and, you know, they're intricate, they have chimneys and channels, and it's all for air circulation or maintaining humidity levels and all that. And some people say, well, we tend to think of the termites cultivating fungi, but actually you could equally say that the fungi cultivate termites to build them a certain infrastructure that supports them, and kind of, because they break through the surface, and then the termites scramble to fix it and to reestablish certain flows. And I just thought it's interesting to think about urban planning and about viruses, because we see ourselves as in charge of urban planning, but we're probably not really. And it kind of, I guess it reshapes the balance again. But I don't know. Just to say this, I really enjoyed reading the, it was so rich. It was way too, I mean, it was like, I was like, it's infuriating to read in a positive way. I had like 2 documents open and kind of, so I have the notes there, and it was just like, I didn't leave enough time to read it. So it's thank you. It's very interesting. And there's lots of stuff one could say about directed evolution versus assisted evolution, the hybridity of humans, and how we're built from viral sequences, and how viruses contain human lipid as an envelope, like also corona. And like there's so much to think about the hybrids and boundaries, and so it's very interesting.
Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And this is one for the more hardcore STS scholars, I guess, who can tell us how viruses and pandemics and things like that have shaped our cities. So yeah, but there are already quite a few thoughts on things like fungal architecture, for instance, and a lot of the things that I've been thinking with my colleagues is the notion of resilient architectures, because I mean, in Europe, for instance, the big problem in people's heads, I guess, is the problem of refugees, right? So the cities are, so the standard argument that is used is that cities are not, meant to accommodate the influx of so many new people, right? And that is also, that connects very quickly and easily to the disease metaphors, to the viral metaphors and things like that. These sometimes, human beings being referred to as cockroaches, or being referred to as viruses for that matter, and things like that. I mean, that's quite a common thing. So resilient architecture is kind of a paradigm which tries to transform this question and say, well, traditionally cities, so the way that cities have been planned or discussed is that you move from point A to point B, and you can kind of log, okay, in the next 10 years, we would have a growth of so many people, and so on and so forth. So the cities are not resilient, right? So most European cities are not resilient. But if you add another million to a city like Delhi, which already has a population of 45 million, yeah, sure, drop in the ocean, right? Because the city is so much more constructed in such a different way, right? And also because people's minds have a slightly, I think people have a bit more flexibility in the way they approach the question. And this is true of a lot of cities in the global south, because the resources are scarce. So there is already a system of codependence, interdependence that relies on on flexibility of both imagination but also resilience in terms of habitats, right? So there are quite a few interesting questions in all of this. So I'm actually quite interested in seeing where fungal architecture goes. Ursula might want to add something on that. Actually, she's invisible right now, but yeah.
Sorry, I put the camera out. Yes, I haven't started looking into this, but I hope someone will soon in Oslo. So yeah, let's talk about it sometime soon, Bodhi.
Anne, did you have your hand up?
I had just to, I have a question on page 40. It's in the AND network theory in the footnote 18. It says, intelligence for the Formicidae is always already about a process of externalization, inscribing the world through traces of all kinds, which in turn modify the behavior of ants. The unit Umwelt, ant, evolves collectively. There is a link here with the work of Terence Deacon, for whom processes of externalization define the ever higher complexity of life. And so I was thinking of the article from Stefan Güttinger, who you are on the call, on the viruses as living processes. So I was wondering, can you develop a little further what you mean by this processes of externalization?
I would like Geoff to answer that one, actually. That's
on the back on the call.
Because I think he can give a much more informed answer to this question. My perspectives will come from something. So
okay,
yeah,
that's fine. Thanks.
Geoff, can we borrow you for a few seconds from the bureaucrats? We've got a couple of minutes left. I think the machine has taken Geoff's brain over today. But yeah, I also like that. That's an amazing footnote. All kinds of fireworks are going off as I read that. You've got, Whitehead together with Calonne, together with all these amazing things. Yeah, I would love to talk about that footnote. But Bodhi, do you want to, Geoff in the beginning said that you're working on a new project related to fungi. Do you want to sort of briefly talk about that project and solicit input?
Yeah, I would love to. We're kind of following a similar structure in terms of, or at least we have started to think in terms of a similar structure, but I'm not quite certain that it's working. I mean, in the sense that it worked for the ant paper, but I'm not sure it's working for this one. And we have been reading quite a bit of science fiction around this. So Vandermeer's books, for instance, because Vandermeer uses a lot of this. We've also been, I was just mentioning this to even earlier, the Tate Thompson's Rosewater. So we've been reading quite a bit to see how science fiction has worked with these with this, and so far we've kind of like barely, I think, scratched the surface of science fiction fungi, because it's a very rich world. So yeah, any thoughts, comments, inputs you have on this would be more than welcome.
So I'm coming in invisibly without my body, but I actually wanted to really recommend a friend who is doing a seminar tomorrow at 12 p.m. for free. Carla Gann Studio, who has an avatar called Carla Gannis, G.A.N.N.I.S, I believe, or just G.A.N. But she's really wacky and amazing, and she's using a lot of AI in her work. And actually what she's teaching tomorrow is this platform called Playform.io, which is all about using artificial intelligence to create visual hybrids. And her whole platform, so she's a comedian. I met her at, we were together in Lithuania at a residency that was all around comedy, humor, and the absurd. And it was really wonderful to see her presentation, because she actually does these interviews with her live body and then her virtual alter ego. And they talk to each other and they say things about each other. It's really funny. But she'll be teaching a skill tomorrow that may be generative for anybody's work, you know, if you're interested in AI and visuality but I mean, I think, for example, so she was just commenting in her Instagram feed about this article that came out yesterday in the New York Times about this, you know, bodiless actors for, or at least not the typical human body as actors for Hollywood films, right? And so she immediately started getting to work on the composite of what a comedian would look like, you know, using this AI platform to be able to create a different type of model than what the Hollywood kind of normative approach which was to use the sampling of all like Miss Universe contestants, right? So they were trying to create this composite image of a woman based on all of this Miss Universe photographs. And so what she's doing is she's creating a comedian based on composites of, you know, comedians, women from around the world. So she's an interesting character to think with, interestingly, I think, and she has like a Wunderkammer that you can navigate virtually in these times. Something I heard about recently that sounds appropriate for all of you.
Lisette, can you pop the details in the chat? A number of people are asking to how to find the seminar tomorrow. Not sure if Lisette heard that, but I think we might have to wrap it up. Bodhi, do you have any final thoughts about this paper or fungi or anything you please?
No, no. Thanks everyone for you know, your great questions and comments. Thanks for inviting me, even and Rachel. It's really been lovely. And yeah, maybe we can stay connected. This is my email. Yeah. So hope to be in touch. And in case you're interested in what I kind of do at the moment, this is my project. And this is my project. So yeah,
Fabulous. Thank you so much for this delightful piece, Bodhi, and we'll add you to the weekly email list. So come back any Monday. The time jumps around a little bit depending on where in the world the speakers / authors are, but a real pleasure to think and speculate and yeah, behold this universe with you. Jeff, you're back. There was a question for you, Jeff.
I'm back for the closing. I'm so sorry. I've been on a phone call with Social Security on and off all morning, and I didn't want to lose them once I finally had them. Once I finally had them talking to me.
Sounds horrific. Talk about AI and distributed intelligence.
Yeah.
There was a specific question. I don't know if you heard it about footnote 18 on page 30. I think it was Anne. Was you delved into that? Do you want to try to re-articulate your question?
Sure. So it's on page 40 and it's footnote 18. It's about the process of externalization, define the ever higher complexity of life. And so I was wondering if you could elaborate a little further what you mean by processes of externalization. And you're quoting the work of Terence Deacon there.
Oh gosh. Yeah, externalization, as I understood it, there was pretty much. I mean, I'm using Deacon here, and the externalization is basically the scaffolding that beings, either social, in the sense of humans using it, or kind of any particular organism. His idea is that you tend to scaffold complex processes so that the organism doesn't need to do everything. You change the world or you change yourself in such a way that the scaffolding means that the externalization means that you don't need to take care of everything yourself. It's all sort of taken care of for you. And that was the concept of, that's Deacon's concept of the teleodynamic. And that's why we were criticizing Deacon, is that he was seeing teleodynamic processes. In a sense, teleodynamic is another way of expressing, what looks like intelligent design. But it's not. But the teleodynamic it seems to be with a purpose, and the scaffolding seems to have a purpose. And we wanted to show that, we were just making the observation in that footnote that scaffolding process, the externalization process, is not just what happens in organisms; it's what happens in our relationship with computers, for example.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay.
So, Anne, do you want to do a brief plug for your paper that we're discussing next week?
Sure. So next week, my colleague and I, Finn Holm, and I, we will be presenting on our paper, The Multi-Species Entanglements in the Virosphere. Just as a side note, this is not really our research area, but we are both in Japanese studies, and we were organizing a conference on non-human minds that got canceled in early June. It would have been here at the University of Zurich, but we were still able to hold the discussion sessions via Zoom, and we got the call for papers, and we're still trying to get a special issue published. But this triggered our thinking what this current pandemic means, and in what way it the anthropogenic climate change and overpopulation might be the reason exacerbating this pandemic, and that in the future we might have more of these pandemics, because the virosphere is in friction with the anthroposphere. And so we wrote this paper, and we very much look forward to hearing comments on how we can improve it, because we would like to submit it to a publisher sometime in early fall. So yeah, thank you very much in advance for taking the time to read it, and we very much look forward to the discussion next week.
Great, thanks Anne, thanks Bodhi, and thanks Geoff. This was a real delight to engage with everyone. So see you all next week.
Thank you.
See you all next week. Yeah.
Thank you very much.